Hello everyone, this is June here and I'm back again as I promised to you yesterday. So what is the topic that we are going to listen? Yes, no prizes for guessing, it is on mindfulness again. If you have listened to my previous two podcasts, I have discussed what is mindfulness, why is it important, and why it is so imperative to inculcate mindfulness in our lives, and more importantly, how mindfulness and education can bring a huge transformation and shift in the education system. So my second podcast was focusing on the kind of practices you can make the children, the learners do in the classroom, keeping in mind the mindfulness. Today, we're going to talk about creative mindfulness. So what is creative mindfulness? See, in traditional mindfulness meditation, we develop awareness of the breath, the body, the thoughts and emotions. Now, when we bring all of this and we start focusing, when we combine them, okay, and we just combine it with embodied awareness, then it finally or eventually leads to, I would say naturally, that leads to mindful creating. And when it leads to mindful creating, we are practicing creative mindfulness. So before we talk a bit more about creative mindfulness, let me tell you that how can mindfulness help children? I have already shared in my previous podcast about the same, but I would like to just remind you again. You see, mindfulness exercises, typically the kind of practices you can make your learners, your students, or even your children do, that will help the child to get better in touch with their thoughts, their feelings. It's very important that right at a very young stage, the children start recognizing the sensations, the thoughts and the feelings, the kind of all different kind of emotions that is arising within them. And more importantly, to acknowledge them. So with increased awareness of how they are feeling in the current moment, it becomes less emotional reactivity and a greater ability to listen and to communicate more thoughtfully and effectively start taking place. If you have noticed that as adults, many of us have the tendency to react. I would say that I had this tendency of reacting really fast, especially if somebody would say anything which I did not like or unpleasant or untrue. I would react instantly. I would snap right away. But that is not the right thing to do. Now, only if I was taught how to be mindful, okay, right at a very tender age, and probably I would have not gone through those painful phases in my life, especially when I was an adult. And during your teens, you have to be, there are a lot of hormonal changes that we all go through. So sooner you bring mindfulness in the life of the children, in the life of your child, the better it is. Therefore, in the near future, although the emotions will play an important role, but they shall be less reactive in nature, and they would be more responses other than reactions. So there is a difference between reaction and responses. When we react, often our reactions are not so positive, whereas respond is simply when we listen or when we are questioned, we just respond the way we should. Then another most important aspect should be inculcated, and that is the ability to listen. We cannot deny that we just listen to people only to answer as early as possible. We don't really want to listen what the other person is saying. And yes, that's a problem. But we cannot blame, because the ability to listen is also something that should be instilled, okay, right through our education system, right at the very young age, starting at home and then finally, in the classroom practices as well. And when you are less reactive and you are a better listener, of course, you will be able to communicate more thoughtfully, because when you're listening, you're thinking. You're actually thinking, and you're waiting for the right time to speak out. So you know when to respond or when to say which would be more effective in nature. And now, as we were talking about creativity, so there is something called mindful art. Now, art is a natural way, I'm sure you all would agree that it's a very natural way to practice mindfulness. Very simply put, you just take anything, you just start coloring, you take a drawing book and you start coloring, or you start drawing, sketching. If you're already into this, you would know. It requires a lot of focus and attention, because the colors, the textures, all this play a huge role, and they all help us to be in the moment. So you don't need any previous training to meditate through art. If you have that inclination towards art, what are you waiting for? Mindful art is just what you need. Okay, so as you know, children, they love drawing anything and everything, right? They don't have to be an artist in the long run, but when you give them exercises where it requires much more attention, because you have to design the task in such a way that it should not be just a scribbling. It shouldn't be that they can, they are just scribbling or scratching, or they are just, simply dabbing some color. So give them a task where they will have to really pay attention to what they're drawing or what they're coloring or what they're sketching. Okay, so there has to be an outcome which they have to meet, because if there is no outcome, if you just give them that they can do anything with the colors, then that may not serve the purpose. However, that is also a good thing to do at times, but I'm talking about mindful art in specifically. So you can definitely implement that, and you yourself as a parent, as a teacher, try it out. Okay, all you need is the willingness to draw like a child, and with a freedom and with a sense of curiosity. Just do it. You got to do it, to believe it. Another thing that I'm going to talk about today, or rather I would add to it, is that very often we hear the parents speak, the teachers complain that the students are not focusing. My child is not paying attention. He doesn't concentrate. She refuses to concentrate. Now, we all want them to concentrate. We all want our child to concentrate. We all want the children to concentrate. But hey, have you questioned this to yourself, that does anybody even teach us how to concentrate? What is concentration? It is just to pay focus, right? Nobody teaches us how to pay focus, but everybody wants us to be focused. And the wanting of being focused starts right, the time you start recognizing and your parent wants you to do everything with the right attention. But let me tell you something. you have to teach your child to focus. It is not a default process. You have to. Otherwise, it becomes a very painful process for the child, because everybody is telling them to concentrate, pay attention, please focus, but they don't know how to do it. So how can you get started with helping the children, your child, to be more focused? You can practice some simple exercises. For example, set aside a reasonable amount of time for your child. If you're a parent, set aside some reasonable amount of time for your child, and tell your child that, okay, we are just going to do this one task, and all of the attention, you are going to focus this on one task only and nothing else. And similarly, you can implement it in the classroom as well. But today we are going to do whatever, and that's all we are going to do now for the next half an hour, and nothing else. Nothing else we are going to pay attention to. That's one. Next is avoid multitasking. I know multitasking is something which is required in the long run, but initially to develop the habit of concentration, the power of concentration, just ensure that you are telling your child, or you're helping students to do one thing at a time. It's a good practice as well. Also, start planning proper breaks, even at homes. Have a routine, and in that routine, ensure that there are proper breaks, because breaks are just not applicable in school. It is equally applicable at your homes too. So it's better to have a routine. It's better to get into the mode of discipline, and being disciplined, it's not boring. It's just that it helps you to be more mindful. Next is help your children to do yoga, a little bit of yoga. And in yoga, one practice is the belly breathing. So with belly breathing, you can really benefit, and it really helps in a huge way. And last but not the least, practice observing things in the moment. And if you have noticed that whatever I am saying, it all boils down to that: give attention, pay focus, watch what you are doing at that very moment, and not just what you are doing, also how is it making you feel? How do you feel at that moment? It is perfectly all right if I'm not feeling good at this point of time. So to acknowledge that emotion is very important. Most of the time we are suppressing our emotion because we are scared, because we feel that if I am outspoken about it, I will be judged, or I would not be understood. My teacher would scold me. My mother will not understand. You see, that's how we start suppressing our emotion. And in the longer run, what happens is you have a whole lot of baggages within you, and that itself becomes an obstacle towards your creativity. It doesn't let you open up. Now, if you want to open up, if you want to be free from within, you have to start at a very young stage. And if you have not a problem. It's not too late. Okay, so all of these suggestions are not just for the children. As I said, you as an adult can also implement this in your life. Start practicing. Okay, to be creative is what makes all the difference. Well, so today's podcast is a bit long. Okay, not too long, but a tad too long than the previous podcast. But I really hope that you find it helpful, and you incorporate some of these ideas in your daily routine, whether it's in classroom or whether at homes. Please do it, and please welcome, and please make mindfulness as a member, as a part of your lifestyle, to make all the difference in the world. All right, here. So that shall be all for today, and thank you for listening. Thank you very much. And yes, I'm going to be back again, and let me see how can I help you more when I come back next for my next podcast. See ya. Have a good day.